I'm Adrian Warren here with Prices Realty. This is in March. No doubt you've seen on the news information about the National Association of Realtors settlement in regards to commissions and some of the things that will go into effect with all realtors as of July of this year. Once that settlement is agreed, it's still somewhat up in the air, so we don't have it cemented in stone yet as to exactly what's going to happen, but we have pretty much a good idea, and I explain to you right now based on the settlement what does that mean. There is a lot of misinformation going around that you as a buyer are now having to pay your buyer's agent fees when they help you buy a home. I've sold hundreds of homes to customers over the years on the buying side. I've had many come back to me and help buy others, and never in that time period has that actually happened. It doesn't mean that it won't happen, it means that it can happen, but it's not necessarily going to happen. Why do I mean that? The seller still has the ability to decide if they want to, when the listing agent, like for example, if I go to list a home and I'm talking to a seller and they give me a commission to list a home, I'm going to advise them that we still need to give a commission to the buying side as well. So wherever they give me on the listing side, I'm going to split that with the buying side of the transaction. So if you think that you're going to have to basically pay the buyer's agent, isn't necessarily true. It may happen, but let's talk about situations that relate to that. What will happen, and there are two things that are going to happen. Number one, that the additional information as to what the buyer's agent will receive from the selling side is no longer going to appear on the MLS. So what that means typically that when we print off a listing on a property, and oftentimes I give copies of that to customers, it will have on there what the selling side is paying me in regards to take care of the transaction. So that information has always been available. It's no longer available on the MLS. Now, a seller has always had the ability to decide if he was going to pay that or not. They've always had the ability to decide in total how much they will pay to a listing agent, to list and market it. So all that thing has been negotiable. So this thing that's saying that's never been a negotiable, that's wrong. Over the years, I've negotiated different things, both on the buying side and the selling side, to make it work. So we do what we do, which is help you buy and sell homes. I've been doing that for over 20 years, and I'm pretty successful at it. So one thing is, as I said, is the MLS no longer will have what is on there, what the selling side is willing to pay the buyer's agent. Now the buyer agent, what that means is that whenever you want to go look at a property, is going to need to call the listing agent and determine, is that seller paying a fee to the buyer's agent to help them sell that. And I think in all probabilities, you're still going to find that's going to happen in the majority of cases that will do that. Because basically, if you don't do that, I think that's going to reduce the pool of buyers down considerably by those who have the ability to buy. Because in some cases, I'll talk about it in a bit minute, I'm kind of moving on point, but I'll come back to this in a minute, explain more. But another major change, which is very significant, that you as a buyer will have to sign a broker's agency agreement. It's called a BBA, that will outline the relationship that will now exist between you and your buyer's agent, and it has a date on there. It tells about the area location, but also does outline how the buyer will get paid as well. Whatever is stipulated that is on that agreement, that is the maximum that agent can get paid. What it does mean, if you sign that, if the selling side does not offer a commission, then you're responsible to pay your agent that commission. So what I'm saying, that once you sign that basically whatever is agreed upon, if the selling side is paying nothing by way of a commission to the buyer's agent to help sell, or maybe they're paying less than what you've got on the agreement, you'd have to make up the difference. Alternatively, if whatever you agree to between the buyer's agent, say myself, and you as a buyer, if the compensation that's offered by the selling side is higher than what's on that agreement, that me as an agent cannot get paid any more than what's on that agreement. However, it also means too that if there is agreement in there that you as the buyers owe me a commission, and if a commission is being paid by the selling side, we're not getting paid twice. Basically, the money is going to come from the selling side. So you just won't have to pay what's on the buyer's side. It's just a matter of how we're going to be able to word that to make that work. Now, what it means in a contract, is that we can't put in a contract that such and such a percentage or money amount is to be paid at closing to the buyer's agent. So it can't be on a contract as a condition of that. So the Board of Realtors is still working out exactly how that's going to come into play, what that will involve with. And there are a couple of ways you can handle that. Typically, a way you can do that is that when we go show a home, and sometimes on an offer, we'll put well, let's just talk a little bit about when you buy a home, there's two different ways you can buy it. You can buy it with cash or you can buy it with a mortgage. If you're buying it with cash, you have a limited amount of closing costs. That's where the title company is going to charge you to do the transaction, which is generally not a whole lot of money. Sometimes around the $500 range, could be a little bit higher. It just depends. Particularly in our location in Lee County, there are certain expenses that, depending on where you are, that a buyer would assume or a seller would assume. I'll give you an example of that is the owner's title policy. Within Lee County, pretty much it is the seller that will pay for the title policy. They'll provide you with that. In Naples, in that MLS, it's the other way around. The seller is not responsible to pay for a title policy. You as a buyer are responsible for that. But I rarely sell down in Naples, have done it on occasion. But where I live in Cape Coral, and what I sell Cape Coral, Fort Myers and surrounding areas, it's a selling side story, the seller that will pay for the owner's title policy. So if you're paying cash, and if you have a seller that is not going to go ahead and pay a compensation to me as your agent, what you can do, as on the buyer brokerage agreement, you've always come to the agreement on how much I'm going to get paid. What you would simply do basically is whatever you would make on that property, you make that offer, then you make it less whatever it is you've agreed to with me or with your agent of what the compensation would be. So whatever that amount, you just do that. So what that means that you would not be paying so much money for the house, and they give you the funds that you have now to be able to pay the agent. Otherwise, what would happen on the offer that you make on the cash side, if the seller is basically paying a commission to the agent, then basically there's no need for that. Okay, so it's a matter of, we're still trying to quite figure out exactly how does that get worded, because I said it can't be on a contract. Typically on a finance deal, what has normally happened, and this in some ways complicates a little bit further, is that basically what you could do is you could say that the seller is going to give a percentage or a dollar amount of the sale towards buyer's closing costs. Because when you get a mortgage, when you buy a home, there are closing costs that are involved in that purchase. And typically what happens is your mortgage broker or whoever you're using is the one that tells you how much you need to bring to the closing. So when you buy a home, you got what you're buying it for, you put your money down, but then there's closing costs associated with that. So what that means is that if you put on the listing on the contract that the seller is going to contribute so much of your closing costs, what that means then is the money that you normally bring to the closing for the closing costs is now paid by the seller. So that money that you have can now be paid to your agent. That's whatever we've agreed to. You can pay that to them out of that money. So that's the way you would work that. Where that becomes somewhat more complicated is going to be a situation where that could involve two particular loans, what we call an FHA loan and a VA loan. On an FHA loan is generally designed for individuals who have a limited amount of funds to buy a home. Traditionally, on a conventional mortgage, you aim to put 20% down. And with the 20% down, that eliminates what's called PMI, private mortgage insurance. On an FHA purchase, the private mortgage insurance is included in the interest rate. It's built in together. And typically, the minimum amount of money you need down is 3.5%. That's it. So what I generally find that individuals who have that kind of money, who are doing that, don't have the money for the closing costs. So what they will do is so typically what would happen with that particular situation, if I got a buyer that's an FHA buyer, they typically don't have all the funds needed to buy the house. So again, what we would do is we would ask the seller to contribute whatever funds they need that will go towards their closing costs. So basically all they've needed is the down payment, everything else is in there. What complicates that now, because you have to fill out this BVA, it says it's going to be a requirement, you can't get around it, that's going to be a requirement now when you go look at a home, that this agreement is in place. And I'll explain more about what that is exactly. I'll show you a video of what actually looks like. So what's going to complicate that is if, again, you've got a seller that's not offering any compensation to the buyer's agent, and if we're doing FHA and the buyer needs a seller coverage towards closing costs, you obviously can't take those funds and have the funds to be able to compensate the agent. So what does that mean? Well, it could mean that you as a buyer may decide then, I'm not going to look at any properties where the selling agent or where the seller is not offering any compensation to the buyer's agent, because I don't have the money in order to buy this house. I have the down payment, I don't have the closing costs, so I don't have the funds that's been negotiated to pay the agent. So that's one thing that's involved in there. The second, or another alternative, is it could be where the buyer may decide to go directly to the selling agent and have the selling agent represent them on that transaction. The only issue with that, and I have basically been in situations where I've got both sides of a sale, I'm not a big fan of it. I find it slightly off-putting and slightly nervous, but the reason why I've done that is that the buyer saw an opportunity, because I'm probably going to reduce my overall commission to make this work on both sides, to buy the house for less money. But it does make you wonder then, who ultimately are you representing? Because obviously if you're the listing agent, your job is to get as much money as you possibly can for that property. If you're representing the buyer, even though these are what we call transactional relationships, that again, that the buyer's agent is trying to get the best value he can for his buyer. So when you've got a selling agent representing both sides, it's kind of like, is there a conflict of interest there? You know, so ultimately, who's working for who? So those are just some of the complications that are popping up, and there may be some other resolutions that will come into play in the next couple months with that. The other thing that makes it very difficult for a VA buyer, because sometimes a VA buyer basically is doing a 100% loan, and they have, not all cases, but sometimes they basically have limited funds. So there's no opportunity for them to have the money to pay the buyer's agent. So again, it's going to get a little bit complicated. The other thing too, traditionally, like for example, if you call me up, let's say it's July, and you call me up and you say, hey Adrian, I see you got this property listed, or I've seen properties around, will you help me buy a property? Before I can show you that property, I have to go over this buyer broker agency agreement. I have to do that. So you need to, so you can't like bounce from one property to another and have multiple BBAs signed. It's not going to work that way. You just need to stick with the one agent and use them as your agent. So if you call me up and say, I want to go look at this property, and the first questions I'm going to ask you is, do you already have an established relationship with an agent? Have you signed this BBA? And if you say yes, I'm going to say, okay, what I recommend you do then is you need to go back to the agent, okay, and have them reach out to me, and we'll get you into the property and you go take a look at it. As I said, I'm going to do my utmost to basically, on my listings, to encourage my sellers to offer a commission, wherever it may be, to the buying side. Because I think if you don't do that, the seller doesn't do that, the potential of limiting the number of buyers you would have had is going to drop, and it might drop by a lot. And right now we're in a market where we're seeing a lot of property come to the market. It's taking a lot of time to sell. We're seeing a lot of price reductions. It is a buyer's market. It's not the market 2-3 years ago. Put a sign on the ground, 10 people knock on your door, wanting to buy it, pay more than what you had it listed at. Those days are gone. We'll probably never see those days anymore, but they are gone. So basically, as I said, that we'll get some more information that will clarify this and see exactly how it's worded. But right now, if you are on the finance side, you can put an offer, as I said, and if you don't need closing costs towards the property to help you buy it, if you're not an FHA or VA, you can, or we can put in a contract that this is basically going to go towards closing costs, and then based on the BBA agreement, then you'd have the funds to be able to basically pay me or whoever you choose as an agent. Hopefully you choose me. I've been selling here for over 20 years. I have a good reputation. I know my market like the back of my hand. There's all sort of things I can explain to you. A contract that we typically use is a 12-page long contract. It has a lot of timelines in it. It deals with inspections, it deals with withholding, it deals with 1031 tax exchanges, it talks about financing, when's that due. It's a pretty complicated contract. So to go on your own is not an easy thing to do. But I think it's not just the contract side, it's also knowing the market. It's knowing about areas, locations. Because for example, when I go show a home, I look at the negatives on the property. I look at what is the surrounding area, like is it real close to a water plant, or close to a main road. I look at the layout. Sometimes you can go into a home and sometimes they think, oh, this is a great home, but the layout's odd. And you start thinking, well, let's say if I want to put a piece of furniture here, piece of furniture there, it's not going to really fit. And then you as a buyer think, yeah, you're kind of right. Because what I look at is at some point in time, if you go to sell this property, am I going to have a resale issue? And you might say, well, this is my forever home. I'm never planning on selling it. But I have to tell you that people on average will stay in a home for about 8 years. That's it. So that's average. Some people always stay in longer, some people stay in less, but people tend to move out because life changes, things change. I mean, in the time that I lived here in Cape Coral, I probably moved in the last 20 years, I'd say I think 1, 2, probably 6 or 7 times in 20 years. Now the house I'm in right now, I'm not planning on going anywhere, but something might change 5, 8, 10 years down the road, or a couple of years, and I find I'm moving again. Who knows? So, I always look at the layout, the location, that sort of thing. Is it on city water and sewer? Are there assessments coming in? When the assessment's due? Basically, is it in a flood zone, not in a flood zone? How old's the roof? All things that affect what you're going to pay for that home. I take that and take a look at it, because I've probably looked at about 10,000 homes over the years. So that's a lot of homes I've been in. Some homes I've been in multiple times. So let me show you what a BBA looks like. And there's 2 of them. There's one that is a 3-page one. That's one we're seeing right now in a local MLS. There is another one that's a 2-page, not quite so complicated. But this is the sort of thing you're going to have to get used to and understand how it works. So let me show you that right now. So what you look at in front of me is this buyer broker, or BBA as it's called, that will now be required that any buyers that want to look at a property with a realtor on the buying side will need to fill this out in advance before you go look at a property. This one is a social MLS. I think it's a little bit on the long side. There is a shorter version, which I'll show in a minute. But basically, if we look at it right here, let's see. So basically, you can put the buyer's name, who the broker is with. Item 2 gives a start date and an end date. 3 gives the type of property you're looking for, the location, the price range you're in. And then on this section 3C asks, are you qualified, pre-qualified? Now, pre-qualification is what you do with a mortgage company, and that is actually a good thing to have, because if you do come across a property you want to go after, you're in a position to be able to go after that right now. Sometimes to get pre-qualified can take some time, take a couple days. So if it's a Friday, you see a property, you can't get that sort of till Tuesday, the whole weekend goes by and you may lose out on the property. So generally that's a good thing to do. Any additional terms and conditions that you will look for. And then this talks about what the broker obligations are, talking about the knowledge, their skills, assist buyers determining whether they're capable of buying, discuss property requirements, look at the property, monitor transaction, handle everything relates to the actual purchase of the property and leading up to buy that as well. One thing it does clarify in 4B, there could be a situation where I as an agent could be working with another buyer looking at the exact same property that you're putting an offer on, and then with obligation to make you aware of that, but not say, well, so-and-so is putting this money in, you're doing that, so they're competing with one another. But that's really very rare. In the hundreds and hundreds of times I've done this, I may have only had that happen once or twice, so it's extremely rare. And that was kind of when the market was going crazy, which it's not doing right now. We would see some of that. The other thing we've got here, fair housing, which would discriminate anybody based on color, race, religion, familial status, that sort of thing. D talks about doesn't warrant or guarantee products or services provided by any third party to whom buyer may request. So sometimes we have recommendations for an inspection company, some we've used for years, that's pretty well known. We may suggest that, so that would just cover that. And then basically what talks about what the obligation is on the buyer side to basically cooperate with your agent in getting this accomplished, helping in negotiations with that to find a suitable property, and that any questions that relate to the property are directed to your agent. Now, if it says here, if buyer contacts or is contacted by a seller or real estate licensee who is working with a seller or views a property unaccompanied by a broker buyer, will at first opportunity advise the seller or real estate licensee that buyer is working with and represented exclusively by the broker. So if you say go to an open house and that has lots of interest, you're going to notify the individual who's doing the open house that you're currently working with an agent and you have one of these going, so therefore that's who you will connect with. Providing broker with accurate personal financial information as requested by their broker in connection with ensuring the ability to acquire that property. That's pretty much going to be where a mortgage company, your mortgage broker is going to come into effect. If you're paying cash for a property, we need obviously proof of funds of that. So this isn't necessarily saying we need all the financial information. All I want to do is clarify that you're able to buy a property so that you're not wasting your time looking at something you can't buy. I mean, not mine either. So it works in both of our favor. This one, buyer authorizes brokers to run a credit check to verify buyer's credit information. I've never in 20 plus years ever seen a buyer's agent or broker ever doing that. Again, that will be the responsibility of the loan broker that you deal with for the mortgage. It would pull all that. So I have no interest in doing that. If you're pre-qualified, that's all I need to know. I'm good with that. Being available to meet at a reasonable time, holding harmless from against any losses, damages, cost, expense of any kind, liability to any person because of acting on buyer's behalf. Not asking or expecting to restrict the acquisition of a property according to race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status. So obviously we don't talk about race. So that's not a question that's open for discussion about a location. Our job is to show you homes that are suitable, but anything beyond that, race, familial status, that's not what we're allowed to discuss. Consulting an appropriate professional for legal, tax, environmental, engineering, foreign reporting requirements, or specialized advice. So again, that could relate if you're buying a piece of land, for example, and the land may be in an area where there may be some environmental thing to take into consideration on those. So here's another part that this is indicating a retainer. So upon final execute of this agreement, buyer will pay the broker a non-refundable retainer fee of a certain dollar amount. Generally, it could be a couple $100. It won't be a significant amount of money. And this could be deemed as being not refundable or be credited towards a compensation that is agreed to when it comes to closing. So for this contract to be valid, there has to be some type of consideration for it. Now, this is where the compensation comes into play. As I said, this is something relatively new. Typically, it would just come directly from the selling side, but you may run into a situation where that's not the case. So what this does, it says the broker compensation is earned when during the term of the agreement or any renewal or extension, buyer or any person acting for on behalf of buyer contracts to acquire real estate property as specified in this agreement. Buyer will be responsible for paying broker the amount specified below plus any applicable taxes, but will be credited with any amount which broker receives from a seller or real estate licensee who is working with a seller. So this is where in the A it would put either a dollar amount or it would be a commission amount, or B it could be a dollar amount or commission amount, and it may be an additional bonus depending. So if, for example, the selling side is paying Y, but you agree to pay X, but Y is higher than X, then basically that would just go to you anyway. Or if it's the other way around, then you'd come up with a difference. So those are things we generally find out in advance before going listing a property. And there may be some other change with as times go. Lease with regards to leasing a property, I don't handle leases. A broker option, typically something else I don't handle either, where it could be where somebody is leasing a house with the intent to buy it, and when they buy it, then they will owe a commission. But I've never done that in 20 plus years of dealing with here. As the broker will be compensated for other types of acquisitions, as if such acquisitions were purchase or exchange. So I can't really think of anything other than directly physically buying a property that would be with that. By default, buyer will pay broker's compensation immediately upon buyer's default of any contract to acquire property. So if you back out of a property, not because you couldn't get financing, but simply because you changed your mind, then basically you would still owe that commission on that. So on the 8, it talks about the protection period within so many days after the termination date. So if this expires and say you terminate it, but one of the properties you had that I had shown you or a buyer's agent had shown you, you decide to buy, within so many days of that, you would still owe me or that individual a commission on that one. So that's what's talked about here. Call to buyer's attention, buy by a broker or any other person or found by buyer during the term of this agreement. Buyer's obligation to pay broker fees ceases upon buyer entering into a good faith exclusive buyer brokerage agreement with another broker after termination date. So once this date is ended, if you open up another one of these with a different brokerage, a different agent, then obviously there's no obligation to us. You're now basically with them. On early termination, you can terminate this for any point. You just need to make us aware of that. So buyer may terminate this agreement anytime by written notice to broker, but remain responsible for paying broker's compensation if from the early termination date to termination date plus protection period. So basically, if you go into contract with a property, you can't say terminate this. No, this still is going to be in effect through the execution and the closing of that property on there. But if anytime we not find a property and you determine you want to cancel it, then you have the right to do that. And this talks about dispute resolution. We see persons bound. Broker may assign this agreement to another broker. So if I've got another brokerage that I want to assign this to, I have the ability to do that. They can handle that and they represent you. So that's the way that would work. It would be very rare for a buyer to terminate an agreement. I mean, it's something definitely we're not suited for each other. I mean, that may happen, but I don't recall that happening in the years that I've been dealing this business, but we generally just worked through it and got it done. So this is more of the typical one that we see now. And again, it talks about act as a transaction broker, deal honestly and fairly, count all funds, any clauses want to go in here. And then this is the parties that would sign this. The buyer would sign it and the associate would as well. So that's one. This is a simpler version of that. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so this is a simpler version. It's just 2 pages. Again, it has the buyer's name on it. It has the brokerage name. It has a termination date on it. It talks about the property. And in this case, it gives you 3 options. One is a percentage of the sales price. Could be a flat fee, a percentage of the sales price and a flat fee, or it could be something else, whatever you determine. And this one says during the representation period, the buyer agrees to only use the broker as a real estate representative. Compensation is due to broker upon the successful completion of a purchase transaction, defined as the buyer being recorded as a new owner of record, or upon the successful completion of a lease. Transactions defined as a landlord, lessor, and tenant, lessee, both signs a lease agreement. Any compensation paid to the broker from listed brokerage as a cooperating broker commission shall be deducted for amount due from the buyer as stipulated in this agreement. Buyer is obligated to compensate the broker upon successful completion of any transaction that begins during the representation period, notwithstanding where the broker actually participated. So again, on this one, that whatever amount is agreed upon and the selling side is less, then you know the difference. There's nothing, you know what's on here. If it's over that, then you basically don't owe them anything at all. Broker duty shall furnish buyer with information on prospective properties, facilitate showings, prepare documents when possible, and per the buyer's request or in a reasonable time frame. So obviously, if you want to put an offer on a property, we're going to do that. You know, I work from home. I can pretty much do that 7 days a week, anytime. I'm sitting on a cruise off the coast of Italy. I've done it visit my parents in England. The way things are these days, you can pretty much handle anything anywhere. So again, we talk about dispute resolution needs to go with that, mediation, arbitration, and then just buyers would sign that and the broker would as well. So again, this is a simpler version of that. It's just basically 2 pages. Personally, I'd be more inclined to do this. I like simplified. The less complicated it is, the less verbiage involved in it, the easier it is for individuals to understand it and follow what's going on. We may see maybe some changes. I don't know. Again, this is going to go into effect in July. This has not been a requirement within the state of Florida. Some brokerages have been requiring it, doing a buyer broker agreement for some time. Our office has not been one of those. There are certain states within the US, it's actually been required all along, and now it's going to be required everywhere by the National Association of Realtors. So this is going to be a standard form that before you go and look at a property with me, as if I represent you as a buyer's agent, you're going to have to sign this. There's no way around it. It's part and parcel to it. If you say, okay, I don't like this, I'm going to go to another brokerage, you have the option to do that, but they are going to have you sign this again regardless. So it's just a matter of determining if myself as the agent, whoever you choose, is a good fit. Am I the right agent? And you have every right to ask as many questions you want about me. How many properties have I sold? How long have I been doing this? How familiar am I with the area? And as I showed earlier, I've sold a lot of property over the years. I continue to do that, and I get a lot of repeat business, so I know my market really well. So I think it's important for us to have a good relationship. So hopefully that explains what's going on, what's coming up. Again, if anything changes, I'll do some updates on it, but this is where it stands right now, and that is as of March 22nd, 2024. So hopefully look forward to hearing from you, and please look at the videos I've got and subscribe to my channel. Reach out to me, text me, email me. Phone number is all on there, 239-281-5612, 239-281-5612. Thanks. Bye.